Sam Darnold had a really nice game on Sunday, but just how far can we trust that? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. And thank you so much if you're new here. Hello and welcome. You're probably just very excited because the Vikings won a game, and that is very valid and real. My name is Luke. I will be your host. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search it out on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, including the SiriusXM app, which you can also just search out Vikings, and you'll find live broadcasts of game days from Paul Allen and the crew that you can find on SiriusXM. So go check that out. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today is Twitter Tuesday. That means I am taking your questions as submitted to me via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or via the Google form, which you can find in the show notes to any Locked On Vikings episode or YouTube description, whatever you're watching or listening on. You can also send them to me on Twitter at any time. I'll usually put out a call for those on Mondays. First one I'm going to answer comes from Gary Treeman, who asks, okay, but what if Sam Darnold is actually really good? I know he's not, but what if, though? Wouldn't that be crazy? Which kind of leads into a more concrete question from Skeptical Skull, who asks, would there be any wisdom to signing Darnold for 2025? And Skeptical Skull actually went into some more specifics, which I'll circle back to. But okay, so there were a bunch of questions, so I wanted to lead off with that, to this idea of but what if this is good enough and Sam Darnold's just the guy? What would it take? What would it take for them to move on from JJ McCarthy? And I still think that what it would take, probably literally Super Bowl. That's probably what it would take for them to move on from McCarthy. You have to understand that when all of the local beat reporters and the team and everybody who's heard any rumor, national reporters, anybody, all in lockstep, that the Vikings really, really love McCarthy. Anytime they ask that question or are asked that question, they are we believe in this kid and we understand him to be the future, and that they're willing to say that out loud in front of Sam Darnold's face kind of tells you that conversation between the Vikings and Sam Darnold has also already happened, and that that he understands and they understand. This is a one-year thing, and then you're off to your thing, and we're off to do our JJ McCarthy thing, and so long, and thanks for all the fish. And that everyone has agreed to that dynamic and is okay with it. This is a one-year deal. We don't need to pretend that we have to commit to this if you get a certain QBR. That's why I'm calling this the Get Sam Paid year. That's really the goal here. You're going to go play for somebody else, and we love that for you. We're going to try to make that contract as high as possible by setting you up with great Justin Jefferson yards and good stats and getting the best play out of you so that you go earn a huge contract. Good luck, Sam. So to answer your question, Gary, what if Sam Darnold is actually really good? Then Sam Darnold goes somewhere else, gets paid like crazy. Vikings get a beautiful comp pick if the formula works out that way. And then we all move on with our lives. And we each did each other a favor. Sam Darnold bridged us over for a year, but while JJ McCarthy was hurt, and we got him paid. Handshake, everybody's happy. So Skeptical Skull went into some other specifics, saying, let's say $20 million, $11 million guaranteed, $500K bonus. This gives the Vikings three options for 2025. So this is the suggestion, right? Sign him to that $20 million deal with half of it guaranteed, which I believe you mean a one-year deal. So there's not really any reason not to guarantee all of it, but I get what you're getting at. Which gives them the option to trade Darnold for draft picks to keep him as a backup to McCarthy, or if McCarthy isn't ready, Sam can start for the Vikings. So I think there is a world where Sam Darnold returns, but it's not the one where he does well. It's the one where he plays and looks like a backup quarterback. If the Vikings win 4 games, right, and they already won one of them here, and if they win, 3 more games all year because the Cinderella turns into a pumpkin and everything goes kind of the way that Vegas thought, and it all falls apart, and Sam Darnold plays poorly enough where he doesn't get starting money, and we failed at our mission of 2024, which is get Sam Darnold paid, then he maybe comes back and says, yeah, but I really liked playing for you, and I'm happy to be a backup, and I'm happy to still be a mentor to McCarthy, and I'm going to stay in the building, and continuity, and I'm going to I bought a house here and we're good. And he decides to be the backup quarterback, and you go, thanks, Nick Mullins. We don't really need you anymore. We're going to pay Sam Darnold. And if you're doing that, then you're not paying him $20 million. You're paying him, $4 million because he played terrible and he's, getting the Chase Daniel treatment for the rest of his career now. That's the world where I think this happens. I think signing him and trading him is something that not many teams are going to play ball with. If you sign him to a contract and then immediately call up the Panthers and say hey, do you want to trade for Sam? Okay, it can't be the Panthers. I shouldn't have said the Panthers. That's maybe not an option. I forgot about that thing for a second. But I don't know, call up somebody who needs the Steelers, maybe. Somebody who needs a quarterback and say, hey, we've got this this QB. We just signed him to a bunch of guaranteed money. He's on this contract that you had nothing to do with negotiating. Do you want to give us a draft pick for him and then pay that contract for us? Why would anybody do that? When in reality, everybody's going to be at the combine learning that Sam Darnold's contract is going to expire, and they're going to all be talking to his agents and negotiating contracts with him anyways, right? Which, technically is against the rules, but everybody does it. So that's the reality that you live in. So practically there's not really a way for that to play out that doesn't also involve Sam Darnold just not being a very desirable asset at all. And then it's whatever, then you're making Nick Mullins money and it's at a different tier of the roster where you care a lot less. Torin Danowski says, what was the most encouraging thing about Sam Darnold's performance yesterday that might suggest his success will be sustainable, and what is something that might be cause for concern? I would say accuracy is the thing that is exciting me the most about Darnold. And I still kind of think this is one of my older beliefs that has been challenged, but I still kind of hold it, that accuracy is the number one thing to care about in quarterbacks. It does not on its own a quarterback make. I don't think there's any singular trait that on its own makes a quarterback. But accuracy is, I think, the one thing that if I had to rank every quarterback by one skill, I think you'd get the best ranking out of accuracy. So it's a very important thing. And Sam Darnold was very good at that. There were a couple of misses. A lot of those were, couldn't step into it because of the way the pocket was collapsing on him, or for whatever other reason, his base was messed up. You didn't just get what you got with Daniel Jones on the other side of the ball, where clean pocket stepped into it and just left it somewhere he didn't mean to. That and with Darnold, that was a lot better. There were misses before. That is, cleaner mechanics. That's just growth from, this overwhelmed young guy in, early 20-something in New York. In terms of concern, timing. That's the thing. So it's close, but it's not there yet. But it's just a beat slow sometimes. There's one you might have remembered holding your breath while he kind of rifled one over the middle and it got tipped up and almost intercepted. If you watch that one on tape, I think that's the best example of it, but this happened a couple times throughout the game. If you watch that one on the All-22, it's well after that route breaks, and I believe it is the first thing that Sam Darnold reads, if I'm remembering right, that he just one hitch too long. It was, drop back, hitch, throw is, I think, what the play wanted. And you got drop back, hitch, throw. And that extra hitch was literally just enough time for a defensive back to get his arm in there and cause that thing to tip up and dangerously kind of float in the air for a while. And lucky Vikings, it fell to the ground. That just being a little bit slow about it is a concern that I think a better team takes better advantage of. And that better team might just be the 49ers, who had a great showing on Monday Night Football right before I recorded this. I got a lot of O-line questions and PFF grade questions and then some sillier stuff. So we got a lot to get to here on Locked On Vikings. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted treatment options and clinically proven ingredients you've all heard of, like finasteride and minoxidil, that can regrow hair just that fast. You can do a chewable, an oral pill, a spray, a serum, whatever you think is best, whatever works best for you and your daily routine. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedonnfl. That's HIMS.com/lockedonnfl for your personalized hair loss treatment options. That's hims.com/lockedonnfl. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Keeping it rolling here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. When you're done here, by the way, go check out Locked On NFL. Wednesday mornings, you get me with Tyler Rowland, the Madman, and tomorrow I have some thoughts on Mike Zimmer and the Cowboys defense, and I cannot wait to share them, but I'm going to save them for that. And for now, we're going to continue with Locked On Vikings and the Twitter Tuesday mailbag. The next one comes from Jack from St. Paul, who says, how did the interior O-line hold up on the All-22? I got a whole bunch of questions about this, so I'll be very quick with the general broad. Basically, Dexter Lawrence caused a jillion problems and no one else got anywhere. That is the state of the Giants D-line in this game. Brian Burns got a couple of moments here and there, but I think a game that he probably isn't proud of. Kayvon Thibodeau had a nightmare of a game. Dexter Lawrence maybe had the game of his career, and everybody else on the interior was pretty much stonewalled. But that's kind of how it goes. Like Dexter Lawrence, superstar of superstars, did the superstar thing. And we'll talk more about Dexter Lawrence in a sec with one of these other questions. But the next one comes from OG Enthusiast, a man after my own heart, who says, Blake Brandel seemed to have a really solid game, unlike his interior counterparts. Were the Giants targeting the gap between Bradbury and Ingram specifically, or was there something that Brandel did to stave off Lawrence that was more effective? So Dexter Lawrence aligned mostly, I think, pretty much, he aligned in two places. Either head up on Garrett Bradbury or in the A-gap between Bradbury and Ingram. He had a couple where he ended up on Brandel, or I think he came off the edge once at some point. Sometimes weird stuff will happen with, especially post-snap stunts, all that. But for the most part, he was either defensive left side A-gap or on the nose. So that's very much saying, okay, last time we played these guys, I killed 56, I killed 67. We're just going to line you up on those guys all day long. And whatever they're doing over there at left guard, we don't care. We know we beat these guys, right? That seemed like it was the Giants' plan. And here's the deal. When you've got a mismatch like that, and there's no two ways about it, that is you do not want Garrett Bradbury one-on-one with Dexter Lawrence. He is simply not a good enough center to deal with that. And I don't think Ed Ingram's a good enough guard to deal with that either. And that was very proven. When those guys were one-on-one, it was a big struggle. So when you have that, getting those two together on Dexter Lawrence worked out pretty well. When you could get those two on a double with him so they could help each other, that became a lot easier. And so there are ways to do that with the protection. There are ways to do that with whatever your run play is. But defensively, there are ways to kind of parry those away and force the mismatch. You line somebody up next to, in the other A-gap, and suddenly Bradbury's got to take that guy, and Ed Ingram is one-on-one. There's nothing you can do about that. Outside of leaving a guy unblocked in the A-gap, which doesn't seem like a better plan, there's nothing you can do about that. So at a certain point, you have to survive. And you're just going to take some L's, and Dexter Lawrence just kind of did that. But the sort of schematic cat and mouse was, can you or can you not force this double, right? If you are forcing a one-on-one with Ingram and Dexter Lawrence, well, the Vikings can adjust their protection to get Brian O'Neill involved in that, if you're going to do it that way, or to get a running back involved in that, at least give him a chip or something like that. And then the Giants can do different things to punish that, and you kind of go in this cat and mouse. So, to answer the OG enthusiast question, no, Darnold was just kind of like on a different guy all day. And I think had a pretty good game. But how to deal with like a big major threat like that and the problems that a guy like that causes is actually going to be the subject of a fairly long Patreon video that I'm working on. So go to patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. And for patrons this week, I'll have a longer explanation with film and stuff that can kind of show the dynamics of this, because it truly was a war all day long. And the goal for guys like Bradbury and Ingram in that is survive. You're not going to have the best game of your life. Survive. Trench's fan asks, love you guys. Obviously Dexter Lawrence had his wins, but I didn't really notice Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau while watching the game live. Other than the few penalties with Dibbs and Darrisaw, did our O-line cook? So this was all over Twitter too, but Darrisaw versus Thibodeau was a mauling. Oh my God, violence. It was like Thibodeau was like clearly frustrated after the game too, and I think that's perfectly understandable. Because it there were pancakes everywhere. There was just stonewalling everywhere. Very much the same game that Darrisaw had in the playoff game last time these two teams met. Vikings lost, but Darrisaw had an incredible game and gave Thibodeau a quite the rookie moment, because that was his rookie year. And Brian Burns, on the other hand, went up against O'Neal most of the day. Got his moments, but I thought O'Neal handled himself well. Really, the big problem was on the interior with Dexter Lawrence. And the Cheese Wizard asks, what led to the greatly improved running game on Sunday? Was it a total scheme change, or was it as simple as plugging in AJ makes run game go burr? So there was a little bit of a schematic reason. I think the easy answer is the Vikings did just kind of execute their run game pretty well, and that nice. There were a lot, this was a lot of the Kayvon Thibodeau getting smoked. A lot of Brian Burns' not great moments came in the run as well, and that led to production. Aaron Jones, absolutely huge part of it. Hitting holes on time, hitting it with burst, having speed to get the edge on stuff like that touchdown, which the Vikings just didn't have that last year. Definitely made a difference. Schematically, they didn't change much. There's a lot of speculation. Maybe they're going to go to power. Maybe they're going to go to counter because they got this big guard now, and maybe they're going to pull him. No, not really. They're still doing the kind of duo as a subversion to zone move that's been their bread and butter since Gary Kubiak joined, basically. That's everywhere in the league. That's kind of this Thunder Lightning thing that most of these zone teams are doing. So I explained a little bit on the post game about how duo matters here, but that's a great way to get a double on Dexter Lawrence. So that solves your biggest defensive problem. And if he remains a problem, or if they find a way to split up that double, the running back bounces. And now even if Dexter Lawrence gets through, Aaron Jones is faster than him. So we can get around that way. And that worked out really well. And at the end, I think the will was a little bit broken. I think it's pretty hard to have nice stout run defense when you're down 28-6. Minnesota Turner says PFF had Dallas Turner as the worst player on the Vikings defense. Was it really that bad? Is he a new Lewis scene? Chill. This is why I hate PFF Mondays, man. Like, what you get is a tweet that has a bunch of numbers in it that tells you a spectrum of good and bad, but it doesn't tell you anything qualifying. It does not tell you any substantive information. It just puts them on a spectrum and says, interpret it how you will. We will provide no context for this. When I watched the tape, Dallas Turner didn't exactly stick out. He had a sack, good play, had a couple other moments where he was involved in pressures. I thought he did fine. He had played half the snaps. He rotated a lot with Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel also went back into off the ball alignment sometimes. So he moved around a little bit, made some plays there, and he had his monster game, of course. But I thought Dallas Turner was fine. But in small samples, like single game samples, especially if it's half a game because you're rotating, this comes directly from PFF, by the way. This is PFF people have said this. The grades, especially in small samples, are simply not a thing you should rely on. That math is interesting and it makes for very great marketable articles and stuff like that. But the math that normalizes them, the math that goes into those things needs 100, 200, 300 reps before it starts to be remotely stable. So please join me in ignoring game by game PFF grades. They just are not the product that PFF really wants you to focus on anyways. This goes to the next question, which comes from PFF Lover, who says, how can Pat Jones have 2 sacks and a PFF grade of only 41.3? The deal is, if you play, 10 reps and you have 2 good ones and 2 bad ones, that is just like, it's going to get so wonky for rotational players, especially in one game. It's just, the answer is small samples make math go weird. And the PFF system needs a few hundred to really get to its like stable point. And like, if you really press them, they will go, no, you like look at the season long grades. Trust me, that's going to tell you something better if it's going to tell you anything, but it still doesn't tell you anything. It just says our guys think that guy was good or our guys think that guy was bad. It doesn't explain why. It doesn't explain what they can do to improve. It doesn't explain what you can look for to make your own judgment about it. You're just taking the opinion of people that you've never met, checked by other people you've never met on something that you haven't had explained to you. You're just taking a number and it's being shoved into your throat and you're saying, yes, Dad, thank you more. Please, brains on. I'm begging you. I've got more questions coming up here on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. After week 1 is a really interesting time to hit the sportsbooks because odds and lines go all over the place. For example, NFC North Division odds. Detroit Lions are now heavy favorites at -145. They were like in lockstep with the Packers before. Packers plus 550 now with Jordan Love's injury. Chicago Bears above them at plus 400 and the Vikings still in last at plus 550, but now tied with the Packers. It has changed that much in just 1 week. So if you think the market has over or maybe even under reacted to something in week 1, like the Vikings win or the Bears win, then you can find all of that at FanDuel. Put $5 on it, and you can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime, so don't worry about that. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Finishing up here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, Twitter Tuesday. Next question comes from Chris, who asks, if hypothetically a player was out with injury and then received a suspension for player misconduct for, again, hypothetically, DUI, would the league wait until he was healthy again to enact it? Probably not. And there have been situations where like this exact thing has happened, or it comes up sometimes if a player's like a free agent, like Michael Thomas, who is not signed anywhere, was suspended for week 1. He wasn't going to play anywhere for week 1, but he definitely can't and is suspended for it. So that kind of thing, kind of double jeopardy thing does happen and sort of makes your suspension functionally nullified. So they don't care about that too much. Also, if you're like injured and you're not going to be active for the game, they might treat it differently if you're on like injured reserve and you have a certain amount of games that like you must miss because you've gone on IR, and then maybe they'll levy the suspension to like tack on to the end of that. But I don't really remember of any instances where this issue came up, let alone what the Vikings did. But if you remember one, please let me know in the YouTube comments or on Twitter or whatever. Cam X Storm asks, what are some of the small and unnoticed things that Harrison Phillips does that should get more attention and recognition from Vikings fans? So being a nose tackle is pretty thankless work. It is very often a sacrificial job. You are very often just throwing yourself into a double team with absolutely no expectation of making anything happen there. You simply just have to not get beat so bad that those guys can go off and do something else and continue to be productive. If they have to spend 2 guys in their whole play to take care of you, the defense got an advantage and your teammates get to make plays. Defense is a team thing. That is extraordinarily true, especially in Brian Flores' defense. There are a lot of people doing sacrificial things. You can go blast into the backfield, make the play of your life, and still be expected to kind of play contain and make him cut back into a guy that didn't really have that good of a play, but then the running back walks into his lap and he gets the tackle. We like that. We take that. That's how it's taught. That's plan A. We love it. But you won't get the stat, and you just have to not care. Nose tackle might be the single position where that is the most true. You could argue safety in a coverage way, but I wouldn't. It's nose tackle. So what does he do at no? I mean, he's just really good at the position. And to be frank, people just don't pay attention to that because he's a nose tackle. He's phenomenal at splitting doubles. If you watch, okay, you want something you would learn by watching Harrison Phillips. Watch the angle of his hips. Imagine a headlight on his belt buckle and pay attention to where it would be pointing. When he gets through a double, for leverage reasons and spatial reasons, he'll pull those hips parallel, and the headlight will be pointing to the sideline, and he's very agile about getting that thing pointed back upfield, squaring back up so he can find the tackle. He can find the ball carrier to make the tackle. That's something you can learn from Harrison Phillips, but also just being very strong and disruptive in the run, and also having really great lateral footwork so that when they are going to try to do, zone footwork and move the whole pocket lateral, move the whole run play lateral, he can keep up with that. He's not going to fall behind and get reached and kind of defeat the lineman to the gap the lineman's trying to get to. And if you can stay on a shoulder that guy doesn't want you to be on, you can sort of wreck the play that way. In a way that you might not get a tackle and it might not show up on the stat sheet at all. But like we've established, we don't care. You made the play, you get some of it. You get some of that credit, in my opinion. Yancey McFrondo asks, I'm seeing Dexter Lawrence wreak havoc on Sunday. If you could pick one, which would you rather have on your team? A dominant edge rusher or a dominant interior lineman? Nose tackle. Slam it. Nose tackle, absolutely. So that might be a controversial take because edge rushers do a lot of get a lot of the pass rushing glory, but it all starts in the middle and works its way out. And analytics has actually kind of caught up on this in the last few years, where the idea of a space-taking nose tackle having an impact on the statistics that other players get is like a measured effect that some of the like longer term studies are like have started to find in the last few years, where somebody like Dexter Lawrence is going to ensure, this happened all game long, that Kayvon Thibodeau has one-on-ones all day long. Christian Darrisaw beat those one-on-ones because we have a stud that should be an all-pro at left tackle. Good for us. But every Giants opponent is not going to have that. And Kayvon Thibodeau is going to have his game where he gets to go up against somebody that isn't a should-be all-pro and gets to get his and have a crazy game and say, look at my bounce back. And Dexter Lawrence will own some of that production and be responsible for some portion of that production. And I don't think that the same effect really goes the other way. You have a really good Danielle Hunter style edge rusher. It doesn't really make opportunities for Harrison Phillips to go be this really big productive guy unless that guy is like Aaron Donald or somebody, Fletcher Cox in his heyday, somebody super special. I don't think it goes the other way around. I think the interior lineman can set up an okay player to be really, really, really successful. A really good edge rusher will get his own production, but he won't set up the rest of the team as much as an interior guy will. So for me, I'm big on the interior. Brian Smith says, how can we reasonably evaluate anyone's performance against that Giants team? I'd love to say I'm filled with hope, but my biggest takeaway was just how trash the Giants are. I don't have an easy answer for you. This is a skill. This is a skill that you, Brian, can develop if you want to work hard at it. If you feel like it, if that's something that you want to chase, that's a skill to understand the difference between whatever the matchup is, right? A good O-line play or a good D-line play or a bad O-line play or a bad D-line play. Who is responsible for this? Did that tackle just have a bad pass set? Well, to know that, you have to know what pass sets are supposed to look like. Was it just a really good pass rush? We have to know what a good pass rush is supposed to look like in a vacuum, out of the context of everything. What makes for a good pass rush? That takes a little bit of work, a little bit of research, a little bit of patiently sitting down and learning and watching. There's a lot of clinics on YouTube. I'll send you some of them. Send me an email, lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. Say, hey, Luke, what are those clinics you were talking about? I'm interested in learning X position. I'll send you something that's free to watch. They're everywhere if you really want to learn this stuff. But it's going to take time. And that is a skill. Just kind of looking, well, that team is bad and assuming that everything that happens to them is meaningless for their opponent, you're probably leaving a lot of meat on the bone analysis-wise. Bad Dad Joke says 1, 2, or 3, rank them in order of how good they were. Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, and Kirk Cousins' dead cap hit. Kirk Cousins' dead cap hit, famously the most expensive player on the Vikings right now. at $28.5 million. So obviously the top is Sam Darnold. The second is Kirk Cousins' dead cap hit, and Daniel Jones, who had a strongly negative EPA for the Giants, is number 3, because at least Kirk Cousins' dead cap hit had a neutral effect on the field. Peter asks, do you ever wake up in a cold sweat reminded of the fact that Spielman traded a 4th-round pick for Chris Herndon? No, but now I hope everybody who listened to this podcast will. Thank you for that opportunity to share it again with everybody, Peter. And Scholarship asks, final question I'll take tonight, which is, what adjustments has Brian Flores made to fix the issues that plagued the defense at the end of last season? This is a fantastic question. I am fascinated with it. I am not quite done formulating my answer to it, which will also be a Patreon video at patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. So I'm going to table that, and that is going to be like the main topic of tomorrow. I'm going to spend a whole show on it because it's very cool. The ideas that comprise the Flores defense, how they got beat last year, and what it looks like Flores' answer to this is so beautifully simple, but I would have never thought of it. I love it. I'll leave it the tease at that, and so you'll have to tune in tomorrow to get your answer. I will see you all for that, and as always, Skull.